Hi everyone, and welcome to this session. I appreciate you might not work in procurement, but congratulations that you've chosen one of the most neglected areas when it comes to AI ethics. And so today's workshop came on the back of the collaboration between Sopra Steria and the Scottish Government, as we were looking at some of the Scottish ambitions to become an ethical digital nation expressed in the Scottish Digital Strategy. And so what we did within the project was look at how procurement is actually quite a big gateway into unethical outcomes when it comes to AI. And the reality that we're facing at the moment, as we all know, is that AI is booming everywhere. There's a lot of pressure to adopt it more widely, but we're also facing a big skills shortage. And so we often have to resort to procuring new solutions. So some of you may be not directly involved in the procurement process, but you might be the ones who are saying, I need this new product, or I need something to help me with something else. Or you might just be really, really interested in procurement. I'll take that too. Hopefully you'll enjoy this workshop. So we've got quite a tightly packed agenda. We'll start with a brief intro. And then we'll talk about some ethical challenges and implications of these in procurement context. Then Michaela will talk us through best practice and some of what Scottish Government is doing in this space. And then we'll get on to the workshop part, which will involve you getting your hands dirty with some procurement exercise. And then we'll wrap up with a short reflection and hopefully some tangible points of action that all of you can take. So just to set some ground rules for today, you'll be working kind of in your tables, but I hope I don't need to say this. Treat each other with respect. Share the air, so let everyone talk. If you're like me, you get really, really passionate really, really quickly. And I know that it's very easy to hold the mic, but let others express their voices too, because that's what part of what ethics is about when we talk about ethics of AI. And then if you don't know, ask. We've got brilliant team today who'll be facilitating your conversations. I'll start with myself because I'm first. So I'm Victoria. I head up digital ethics consulting at Sopra Steria. And from Sopra team joining me are Kevin McNish, who heads up our ethics and sustainability practice, David Rose and Francesca Ilalamo, who are our ethics and sustainability consultants. And we've got Michaela Amalkova from Scottish Government. Michaela works as a data scientist. Data ethicist. So we'll guide you through today. But let's start with some scene setting to give you a bit more context of what we'll be talking about and why it matters. So imagine you work for a public body and you have a responsibility to distribute benefits to the citizens of your country or to people in your particular area. But you're facing a lot of pressure around potential fraud that might be going on when people are claiming the benefits when they shouldn't, or money's going in the wrong amounts to people that shouldn't be getting it. And so you're tasked with finding a solution, and the solution is a technology solution. So what you do is you put feelers out, maybe put a public procurement out, to get some vendors to tell you about how they can help you address this problem. And they come and they say, look, we can help you identify the potential fraud cases so that then you can send your officers and start investigating these. We look at more than 300 different risk factors that would determine that someone's likely to be committing fraud. So what you do is, well, sounds amazing. It will help to streamline your investigations by so much, by flagging just those high-risk cases. So you go ahead, you don't ask a lot of questions, you procure it, you put it in place, and suddenly you're facing quite a lot of bad consequences. This is what happened back in the Netherlands back in 2019, where the Dutch government has put into place an AI-powered, machine learning-powered system to start identifying potential fraud cases when it comes to claiming child benefit. And so the system was flagging quite a lot of people for no apparent reason. But nevertheless, as the system flagged them, their further investigation into potential fraud started. And so these people faced quite a lot of scrutiny. They had to submit a lot of documents. Often, it turned out they were absolutely innocent. But nonetheless, they were being investigated for reasons unknown to them. What's more, they didn't know that they were being watched and observed for that kind of likelihood of fraud. And as more investigations into how the system was operating started to go on, what was actually discovered that the system was very heavily discriminating against certain groups, such as people who didn't speak fluent Dutch or lived quite far outside of the city centre or were single mothers. But there was no clear reason why someone would be flagged for fraud versus someone wouldn't. And so, it's an example in the Netherlands that caused quite a big political scandal at the time, eventually leading to the resignation of the entire Dutch government. But, it's not just the Netherlands, and it's not just that case. Actually, benefit fraud is quite often discussed, and we know that in the UK government, DWP is looking at solutions to mitigate that, again, with AI, to start putting more streamlined processes in place to flag the potential risk. But what this really kind of drives at, and why I'm bringing this example up, is that it's so easy to put a system in place that will have very negative consequences very quickly if we don't ask the right questions at the right time. And like I said, we're facing this big wave of AI adoption where a lot of us will be feeling the pressure to put something in place, to do something, to streamline, to drive efficiency. But what I want to appeal to you about today is to take a pause and ask the right questions. And contrary to some people believe, you do not need to have a philosophy degree to do that. You don't really need to be heavily involved. It's really about increasing your awareness of the kinds of things you may be looking out for. And this is what we're going to cover today. But before we do that, I would like to get a show of hands if anyone has considered ethics in procurement before. Have you heard about ethics of procurement? Is it something that people actually recognize as a topic to talk about within AIs? If we can get a show of hands. All right, okay, good. Well, you'll be leading the session then. Brilliant. So, like I said, a lot of today will be focused on our hands-on exercise, but before we do that, I'll hand over to you, Mishka, to talk about the best practice and what Scottish Government's doing.
Thank you so much, Victoria, and so amazing to see all of you here. Thank you so much for joining the session. I'll just very briefly talk to you a little bit about what we do in the Scottish Government when it comes to ethics of the digitalized world, really. And just to give you a little bit of background, I am the Scottish Government's data ethicist working in a department called Digital Citizen Unit, in case you're interested in the unit's breakdown in the Scottish Government. And what is really important is that Scotland's current digital strategy sets out our commitments and a set of actions for how Scotland can develop into what we call an ethical digital nation. Now, an ethical digital nation for us is all about valuing and striving to design and deliver products and services that are by default inclusive, ethical, resilient, and that really uphold people's digital rights. And the Ethical Digital Nation Programme, at its core, really seeks to enhance the trustworthiness of our digital public services, and as a result of that, hopefully drive that increase in the public trust. And one aspect of achieving this is making sure that these digital public services are procured ethically. It won't be surprising, I guess, to say that a lot of the systems that we use are necessarily developed in-house by the Scottish Government. We obviously need to procure outside, and that's where the ethics of procurement in this sphere of AI really comes into place as one of the fundamental building blocks. Now, as Victoria said, it's always good to take a pause and ask some questions. And for us, that was the time as well. The idea of ethical digital nation is really big. I mean, that's a massive goal, to build an ethical digital nation. And that's why right now, when it comes to implementation, I won't be giving you concrete steps just yet, because we are in that phase of stopping now that we've got this goal and trying to think through this very carefully and consider the different aspects of our government's work that need to come together for this vision to materialize. That's the aspect of ethics of using data, ethics of digital technologies in general, digital inclusion, so making sure there's enough connectivity across Scotland, etc. And what I can tell you now is that we are working across these programmatic boundaries in trying to pull together a set of, well, not even a set of actions, but a concrete action plan and a framework for how we want to proceed towards this goal. In addition to our internal work, we also worked with Suprasteria on a recent discovery project for how Scotland can take some tangible actions forward, and some of the main pillars were education, upskilling and engagement consistently with the citizens. These are essentially some of the key areas that we need to focus on. So when it comes to participation or public engagement, we absolutely recognize that meaningful discussion with the public is absolutely indispensable in developing trust. And in fact, we believe that ethical use of data and digital technologies really is dependent on us, first of all, understanding what the public would consider ethically permissible, and second of all, respecting it and working towards that. And because obviously public attitudes can change as technology progresses so rapidly, it is really important that public engagement isn't something that's done once and that's it. So we are therefore looking at ways in which we could engage frequently enough so that we can understand the changes in the dynamic public attitudes, as well as being able to act upon the feedback that we hear. Having said that, ongoing engagement can be resource intensive, and that's why we are also exploring technical solutions to how we could tackle this really, resource challenge for us. And the last point I wanted to touch upon is the education pillar that came out from the Suprasteria report. And our aim definitely is to improve data and digital ethics expertise across Scotland. And our first step in working towards this is to map existing activities, existing resources, training and design programs that are available across the education spectrum, so from schools all the way to universities, but also in communities learning. And having done this, once we have this mapping exercise, this will allow us to understand where the gaps are and where it would be most impactful to help in enabling ethical innovation. And if anyone's interested to learn more, please come and talk to me. But now I will stop here and let's kick on.
Yes, thank you, Mishka. And now it's over to you. I think we're 5 minutes ahead of time, so we'll get more time to actually work on our case study. So what I want you to imagine is that your job is to streamline recruitment process wherever you're working. We all work somewhere where we hire people. So it is your job to procure an AI tool that will sift through CVs of potential candidates and score their video interview submissions. And so the first activity that we're going to get our hands dirty with is figuring out what kind of questions we'd want to ask those who develop the solution. So it's very open as a task for us to consider, but kind of at the tables, and I think if we can probably create a little group alongside the wall as well for a discussion. So if you want to think about the kinds of things you'd want to be asking those who are providing the solutions. And on the tables and on this slide, you'll have some of the, so you'll have the 6 ethics categories that we use to guide our development of AI and how we support the procurement of AI at Suprasteria. And these categories hopefully will help you kind of think about the framework to ask the questions. So we've got human agency and oversight. So looking at how AI systems are assisting humans in decision making, but also so that people are actually able to override the decisions made by AI systems. We've got privacy and data governance, probably one of the more established principles since GDPR. We've always talked about data privacy and the need for the right governance of that data. We've got societal and environmental impact, so really thinking about how further down the line the AI system might be impacting the society as a whole, but also we know that a lot of AI has quite a big negative environmental impact. So thinking about the kind of questions to ask here. We've got diversity, non-discrimination, and fairness. So again, making sure that AI works for everyone and isn't biased against anyone. Transparency, so looking at AI, so as a user, I want to know that AI system is in place. So how do we enable that? What are the meaningful ways to do that? And then technical robustness and safety. We know that AI systems fall over. I think a lot of us probably have heard about ChatGPT spouting out completely nonsense sentences. So how do we ensure that the system works as it should and is resilient as time passes? So if we turn to our groups, I'll ask our facilitators to help guide the discussion. And if for the next 10 minutes you want to discuss at your tables, bearing in mind the task that we've got. So you want to buy an AI tool to help you sift through CVs and score video interviews. What kind of questions relating to ethics of the solution would you ask the people that are coming and trying to sell you the best next thing to do that? So if we get 10 minutes, you also have Post-its and some pens on the table. And if you want to refer back to the categories, I'll pop them on the screen, and you also have a few printed out handouts for reference. Thank you, everyone. I think we're at the 10-minute mark, so I'm hearing very good conversations. Yeah. Is that right? So I think let's get together for 5 minutes. If each group would like to share a question or two or the conversation point or two with the others. I think we had a mic. Brilliant. So, don't want to put anyone on the spot, but I'll put the group that I was standing next to on the spot. If anyone would like to share any of the points that we discussed. Okay, yeah, absolutely. There you go. Oh, who's taking the mic?
So we got really embroiled in what the category should be. It's just a list of things we should consider. So in terms of the tool itself, what has to do with training, who has been trained in terms of the time hours, the processes, what is the legal basis for all the data that's going to be processed, and then somebody came up with this really cool concept of explainability, how it works, you understand, basically the tool works, and explainability on where the humans are within that whole process, within the loop, and also something on data housekeeping, what's going to happen with the data once it's been taken off and given to the vendor. How will the data be processed? Where will it be processed? And how is the assessment going to be conducted? And you spoke at length about biases and potentially how do we put in safeguard measures into the whole process to protect the candidates. But I'll hand over to you around explainability. I think that was a really cool concept.
I think we spoke about quite a few things, but we did speak about governance for the model development and the processes that the various companies that are listed, how they were developing their models, what controls they had for that. We talked about things that they might be thinking about in relation to model drift and trying to understand the explainability of their model. One of the things that I personally experience is that often vendors that we deal with aren't able to articulate in a transparent way how their tool works. which when we then have to need to articulate that in a privacy notice or something like that, you're left with a really difficult problem. So explainability is a big issue as well.
Thank you. These are very good points. Do we have anyone else who would like to share? Oh, Kevin, just behind you.
Which behind?
Yeah, this may be just related to explainability, but it was just to be explicit around, if you're giving feedback to candidates who've been unsuccessful, how does the AI do that? Or how does the human interpret what the AI's decision has been? So is there a way in which that can be quite clearly conveyed? I guess that's what I've written down that hasn't been covered. There might be something else on the post-its.
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, very, very important point. Anyone else who'd like to shout out?
Hi there, we had lots of questions. I think some have already been covered by the first group there. So we're talking a bit about how this tool fits into the much wider context in terms of standards around recruitment within the organisation and making sure it aligns with everything else that is going on with both recruitment and procurement processes elsewhere, about the potential accessibility of the system, but also then digging into which elements and which criteria are being used to assess candidates within the tool, what parts of the information that is provided, so video interviews that mentioned, so is the image being processed, and if so, what is the training data that's based on? How does it deal with diversity of candidates? How does that deal with if the audio is being processed, which I assume it would have to be, how's it being transcribed or processed? How are people who do not speak as clearly as other people, so maybe non-native speakers, but also different kind of class levels and accent levels potentially being in there as a bias, and just sort of trying to dig away a little bit at the kind of how it works. So I think mirroring that explainability thing, but specifically looking at some of those issues of bias and kind of potential unfairness to candidates. And I think that was a good chunk of what we talked about. Have I missed anything significant?
Brilliant. Thank you very much. If we don't have any more volunteers, I'm just checking in case anyone has any other burning points to make. I see a thumbs up. Okay.
Hello. We had very similar to everybody else, but one of the things that we did also, I wasn't a wee there, I do apologise, was very much about how with these tools will we be able to uphold individuals' rights, because this is automated decision making. How do you withdraw them from process? How do you give them alternative options? If they want erasure of their data, how do you do that? So I think there's a whole raft of ongoing maintenance and rights that need to be upheld thereafter. So what kind of look at that. And from an accessibility perspective, which I think you touched on, this seems to be very much one size fits all. And we know people don't fit into that box. So very much about how will the solution enable all of those alternative pathways through recruitment as well.
Great. Thank you very much. So now we've got some things to think about as we move on to the second part. So on the screen and on the printouts in front of you, you've got 3 vendor proposals that address the challenge that we've posed. So you've come out to the market to buy your AI tool, and this is what we got. We've got Sinister Tech Solutions that have come up with this great tool that basically mines all of social media so that they can give you a true feeling of what the candidate is really, really like. So you'll have all the facts at your disposal. Then we've got Malevolent Mind HR Technologies, who streamline end-to-end AI recruitment. You just specify the parameters, and at the end, you just get the person that you're going to hire. You don't need to do anything. And then finally, we've got Dark AI Workforce Systems Limited, who have sampled across a number of industries and sectors and trained their model to represent as diverse workforce as possible. And importantly, they stress that they do not take as input any sensitive data, and because of that, they cannot possibly be biased. So you've got the 3, you've got 10 minutes, decide which one you want to go with, what the problems might be with the solutions, or ultimately, if you don't want to choose any of them, why not? So yeah, if we can get back to the discussion. All right. Have we chosen our vendor? Do we have a strong winner? Whoops. Okay. All right, everyone, sorry. We're a bit time-bound, so just want to make sure that we get a discussion on that. Did anyone go for sinister tech solutions? All right, can we get a mic? Would you like to tell us why?
I mean, I'm just playing devil's advocate here, but if you are an organization who values safety, perhaps working with confidential information, perhaps there's other reasons, you might want, if it is legal, or even you can cover within your contract that you don't, that your organization is not going to be exposed to the fact that you used that particular vendor for your HR, you might still want to buy a contract for them if that aligns with a strategy of what you're trying to achieve, provided it's legal, and maybe you want to distance a little bit from them.
Okay.
But it can still be a valid way of maximizing the understanding of the employee you are trying to bring in.
Okay. What I would ask back is, what would you say to the person who's being subjected to that solution when they're being assessed for a job?
I think again, I'm just playing devil's advocate here. I'm not advocating for this, and this does not reflect my values. But I think it's important to play devil's advocate because sometimes this is what actually happens. Once again, I think a legal entity aims to. There's a reason why it's independent and has its own legal entity. It has to try to maximize what they're trying to achieve. So I think if that means that you have to go into trying to maximize the amount of information you're getting from somebody, and some of them are going to be subjected to that process. And again, it has to do with what is your strategy and what you're trying to achieve.
Okay, I think an easy solution in this case is letting the candidate know that that's a part of the process and letting them choose to drop out if they don't want to.
That would be a good way of improving the impact to the candidates.
Again, and I think this group brought out a very valid point. What if you don't have social media? What happens then? So quite a gap in this solution. All right, in the interest of time, we'll move to the second one. So we've got Malevolent Mind HR Technologies. Any voices for or against, any problems, mitigations that anyone would like to bring out? Yeah, can we get a mic there?
I think the reason we don't like it is because there's no human in the loop. So you don't know who's checking what's going on. If there's like an issue there, you wouldn't know. So yeah, that was the main thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, a potential mitigation is insert human in that loop at some point. But if you're outsourcing the full solution to the vendor, then you may not have control over that. And then we've got Dark AI Workforce Systems Limited. Any thoughts for pro or against them? Nothing against, all right. Are we buying them? Okay. Just the last table, David.
So we talked about this one probably most actually out of them because we talked about the fact that obviously it talks about not bringing in sensitive data and that takes out the bias, but obviously we know that there's lots of bias in hiring as it is, and lots of organisations, lots of sectors have put in place measures to try and counteract that bias. And so if you don't collect any of that data and if you're not aware of who's applying, who's not applying, who's getting jobs, who's not getting jobs, then you stop yourself from being able to apply any of those possible mitigations. So we talked about things like the disability confidence scheme for recruitment, or other programs that may be in place, or just generally kind of being aware. So I think it's an example of where I think it was mentioned this morning, you amplify existing problems and you just kind of put them almost more out of sight than they already are.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I'm feeling that the room wouldn't necessarily go for any of the three. I guess the question is, how could we prevent the three landing on our desk? Well, one of the ways to do that is just ask the right questions as you're specifying your requirements, as you're putting out your request for proposals. And I guess that will make sure that we don't get that, because they'll have to account for some of the things we talked about in the first part. So explaining how you're involving human in the loop or how you're mitigating bias. But I think there's also a second very important point, that by asking these questions, we're making the vendors adapt their approach. And if you imagine a situation where there's one super vendor that supplies to all of the organizations in a particular region or country, suddenly if someone isn't liked by the AI system, they're finding themselves completely cut out of opportunities for a role, because every time they're getting screened by the same algorithm that straight away rejects them, and they've got no idea why. So it is really, really important. And so the opportunity is for all of us, as we are involved in the requirements, in conversations, in procurement itself. So just to take away, because we are near time. So, I hope you've enjoyed the discussions. I hope you enjoyed assessing the companies, and that you'll remember what we talked about. But in terms of what you can do and the next steps, kind of regardless of your role and regardless of your kind of place alongside a value chain, I always appeal to people to just think about the possible consequences. So taking that breath before we jump in with AI and just think, okay, what could happen? What do I want to happen? But also, what do I not want to happen? And what kind of questions should I ask? Then refer to the ethics categories. You're welcome to take the printouts with you. There's loads of ethics categories all over the internet as well. Probably too many, actually. But hopefully some of them will stick in your mind as well. And then finally, talk about it. Because the more you talk about it, the bigger the likelihood that someone will be in that room and will ask the right question at the right time. And yes, ideally, we'd all improve our governance processes and have the right checklists. We said beyond the checklist, because yes, checklist is great, but we really want to encourage you all to think about these issues and ask the right questions and challenge at the right time as well, so that we can all benefit from better AI. So thank you very much.